Hello. In today's lesson, we are looking at what was the Berlin Blockade. We've got two learning objectives: to understand the reasons why Stalin ordered the Berlin Blockade, and to understand why the Berlin Blockade was seen as a flashpoint in the Cold War. Now, you've got a worksheet to complete in Google Classroom. This video will prompt you when to complete each task, so you know to stay on task. And any questions you might have, feel free to contact your teacher or me, gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. So, looking at the course so far, 1943 to 1947, we've seen the tension building in the Cold War between the Russians, symbolised here with the bear, and the USA, symbolised here with the eagle. But 1948 sees the first flashpoints, and it's all to do with Berlin. Now, the examiners love that key term flashpoint. It's the first time we've got used to it on the course. A flashpoint is a moment where actual fighting, so from turning to a Cold War to a hot war, looked possible. That's what they mean by the term flashpoint. So if you ever see that in your exam paper, that's just what it means. Don't panic. It's where conflict looks like it could actually happen. Now, as we've covered, after World War II, it was agreed that Germany and Berlin would be split into 4 occupational zones. Britain, France, got a little bit of Britain section there we can see on the map, the USA and USSR. And Berlin would be split in the same way, but Berlin was in the Soviet zone. And the issue with all of this dividing up of Germany and Berlin is that the West and the East, well, they had 2 separate visions for future Germany. Let's have a look at them. So what was the USSR or Russia's view on Germany then? What you must understand is that Russia had been invaded in 2 world wars by Germany very recently. And millions of lives had been lost. Russia had been severely damaged twice. And that means if you're Russian, you don't want Germany to be built up again. You don't want Germany to be strong. They said, take materials away from Germany to repair the USSR. We need to take from Germany to repair our country, which has been invaded twice now. They said Germany must remain weak. They basically wanted Germany to be farmlands, and the Soviets should have control over Germany to make sure that it was protected in the future. Now, Berlin added more fuel to the fire, because the USSR said, hang on a minute, we reached Berlin first, it's in our section, and to liberate, to free Berlin, cost about 70,000 Soviet lives. The fighting was incredibly fierce in Berlin. Hitler had told civilians to keep fighting till the last person before he died in his bunker. Therefore, Russia had paid a huge price to free Berlin. It's in their section. Why should they have to share it? Now let's compare that to the USA's views then. So the USA said a strong, democratic Germany was needed in the future. They said we must learn from history. Hitler had only come to power in 1933 because at that stage Germany was poor and Germany was desperate. Now, by making Germany strong and powerful, it would mean it would stay democratic. You're not humiliating the country. When you turn a country poor, people become desperate, people look to dictatorship leaders then. That's why Hitler was so popular in 1933, as shown by this propaganda poster, Our Last Hope, Hitler. But also, the USA realised that Germany being strong and capitalist would be a powerful enemy against communism. And of course, at this point, Stalin was spreading communism throughout Eastern Europe, as we've seen. Now, these different views of Germany meant the 2 sides could never agree on its future, just because they simply wanted the opposite. They worked together to defeat Hitler, but now that common enemy is gone, we've seen the relationship deteriorate quickly. Okay, so task 1 for you then on the worksheet can explain why the USA and the USSR had disagreements over the future of Germany. And also, which viewpoint do you agree with most and why? Pick one. Is it the USA saying Germany should remain strong and democratic? Or is it the USSR saying they needed protection and Germany should have remained weak? Pick one of those sides, tell me which you agree with most and why. The blue slides will help if you need to go back. Pause the video here and then press play to continue. Okay, so the idea was that the four countries, Britain, France, USA, USSR, would hold meetings and make decisions together about the future of Germany. So they would gather around and they would discuss what to do. And they all had to agree. That was key. They said to the West, well, you're allowed access into the Soviet section of Germany. So you can drop off supplies into your section of Berlin. So if you remember, West Berlin was completely surrounded in communist territory, Soviet territory. And they said, we'll open the roads, you can drive in, you can come into our section of Germany to go to your section of Berlin. Now, the West having control of parts of Berlin would cause problems for Stalin. Can you think of why? Well, the western parts of Berlin would be capitalist. Berlin would be split between capitalist and communist. This meant that martial aid from America could be used to rebuild Berlin quickly. West Berlin rebuilt incredibly fast. Millions of dollars were spent to make it strong. This was a complete contrast to the eastern zones, which are communist and kept poor by Stalin. People in Berlin would see the difference between capitalism and communism. The West could use this as propaganda. The West could put a lot of money into Western Berlin, build it up so it looked fantastic, lots of jobs for everyone, lots of money, and then people would compare it to the Eastern side, where Stalin was saying communism was better. Well, it clearly wasn't. But also, the West could use this to send spies to travel to East Berlin and then go behind the Iron Curtain. So that Iron Curtain, that blockade, it's not particularly effective because you've got that gap there, East Berlin. It's like having a doorman at a nightclub, but he's got no arms. It's fairly pointless having a huge Iron Curtain set up throughout all of Europe if you've got that gap where people can go through. Now, the West wanted Germany to have a new currency. German money at that time was worth very little, people had no faith in it, and that meant Germany was staying poor. The West realised if we reset the currency, then people will have more faith in it and it will help to rebuild Germany far more quickly. Now, as you can imagine, when they had the discussions about this and resetting the currency, the USSR said, nope, not a chance at all. And they refused to work with the West. They said, you're not having a new currency. We all have to agree. We want Germany to stay weak. So, very sneakily, in January 1947, America and Britain agreed to work together on their zones. They joined them together in Germany and Berlin, as you can see in this diagram. And this was known as bizonia. Bi meaning two, like a bicycle, two wheels, bisexual, be attracted to two genders. Two, and zonia means zones, two zones there. So they've joined together. What does this mean? Well, it means that they can repair the zones much more quickly. They're working together. These areas will be rebuilt and repaired much, much faster. They didn't ask for permission, though, from the USSR to do this. They didn't go back around that table and discuss ideas. They didn't discuss this and ask for permission. Can you think of why not? Well done if you realise that Russia would have just said, absolutely not. You're not joining your zones. This is not what was agreed in Yalta. We would have a zone per country and we would work together. Now, this merging of zones was a huge threat to the USSR. Now the Western zones would be stronger even more quickly. It was so much easier for the USA and Britain to work together to share resources. Now, all decisions, like I've said, were meant to be made about Germany together. That's what they'd agreed to do, and the West had shown that actually they weren't prepared to do this anymore. This increased tension. So, task 2. Why was the emergence of bizonia such a threat to the USSR? Pause the video here to write a small paragraph. The green slides will help if you need to go back, and then press play to continue. Okay, so what happens next? In March 1948, the Soviets stormed out of the Allied Control Commission. Now, that's basically the authentic historical term for the meetings between the four countries, if you want to impress your examiner. And the Soviets said the attitude of the West made these meetings impossible. And they also accused the West of holding secret meetings. which, to be fair, they had. That's where Bizonia came from. The West, in response to the Soviets storming out, joined their sections of Germany and Berlin together. They included France. So now we are seeing Trizonia. So tri meaning free, like a tricycle, free wheels. Trisexual, not really a thing. But tri means free. Zone, again, zones. Trizonia there. Or, as it's now known, West Germany and West Berlin. So now we are seeing effectively two separate countries. Germany is divided into two. West Germany and East Germany. And spoilers, it's going to remain that way for quite a long time. The 20th of June 1948, and the West now worked together to make Germany strong. They knew a new currency was needed. The Deutschmark was introduced to all three Western zones on this day. What happened? Again, the German money had value again. The Western zones could repair themselves faster and be stronger. West Germany was now rebuilding at an impressive rate. Marshall aid was also pumping a lot of money into these areas. Stalin, as you can imagine, was furious. Stalin wanted all of Germany to be weak and under Soviet control. This would now not happen. Germany had been split into two. It was two separate countries. Stalin was also aware of West Berlin growing strong within his section of Germany. Stalin could not allow this to happen. He had to find a way of taking control of the situation. Now, Stalin knew West Berlin was vulnerable. As we can see on the map, and as we've discussed already, it was surrounded by Soviet territory. You can see there on the map, Berlin, the small blue, green and yellow sections. They are surrounded by the red of the Soviets. And the only way to keep supplies going into West Berlin was Stalin, like we've seen before, opening up the roads and allowing travel in by rail, by canal and by road. That's the only way to keep the shops going. Now, Stalin had previously allowed supplies to be transported to West Berlin. He'd said it's fine, you can use our roads in our section. This involved the West being allowed access. However, this was when they were allies. This was when the tension was not as great. And the 24th of June, 1948, Stalin moved his troops around West Berlin. He closed all roads from Soviet-controlled Germany into Berlin. Blockades were set up, like we can see here, vehicles blocking the road so that the supplies could not come in. This is completely legal. He's allowed to do this. It's his zone. He can move vehicles where he wants. And this is known as the Berlin Blockade. Now, we must be clear here, this is not the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall comes a bit later, 1961. Okay, a wall is permanent, the blockade is more temporary. So why is Stalin doing this? What's he hoping to achieve by setting up this blockade? Well, there was only enough food in West Berlin for 36 days. Stalin was hoping that the West would let Stalin have control over all of Berlin, letting him spread communism to the western sections as well. Stalin is basically saying, look, I'm going to starve this part of the city unless you let me take control over all of Berlin. Stalin also wants to show that a divided Germany will not work, because if Germany is divided this way, he can always do this. He wanted the West to cancel their plans of making West Germany stronger, and he wanted to go back to the four of them needing to work together and all agree on ideas. By blockading Berlin in this way, like I said, it shows, hey, if you ever disagree with us, we can keep doing this. We can keep blockading until you give in to us. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the West, especially the president at the time, Truman. Stalin is using a non-violent method here. Now, if Truman wanted to respond by ignoring the blockade and just driving through it and being aggressive, well, that could potentially lead to war. This is why it's seen as a flashpoint. Truman had to think what to do. Okay, and we will look at what Truman did next lesson. But for now, task 3. Why did Stalin block West Berlin in 1948? The orange slides will help if you need to go back. Pause the video here to write a paragraph, and then press play to conclude this lesson. And that is it for today. Thank you very much, as always, for completing this work. Hopefully you've got your worksheet with all 3 paragraphs. Please make sure you press submit so your teacher can see your work. Any questions or queries you might have, feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. And all it remains for me to say is, as always, look after yourselves, get some fresh air and exercise where you can, and I will see you soon. All the best and take care. Bye-bye.